The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Sonnen. Beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever again! You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo! I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing. And I have my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni. Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Hey, this is FRB, and welcome to a special edition of the FRB Show. It's kind of a joint show with Jason Bryant of MattTalkOnline.com. It's a preview show for the Grapple at the Garden event at Madison Square Garden on Sunday, December 21st. We have an interview with Kyle Dake, the 4-time national champion from Cornell, who's trying his hand at Greco against a world champion from Armenia at Madison Square Garden, and also an interview that Jason did with Bellator champion Joe Warren. So I encourage everybody to buy the pay-per-view on Sunday. I think it's like $14.95. It's live from Madison Square Garden. It's really high-level wrestling, so encourage everybody to purchase that and show some support for wrestling. So enjoy the show, and I'll talk to you guys later.
It's a Short-Time Wrestling podcast. Today we will preview the Grapple at the Garden with one of the more enigmatic and creative and polarizing and thought-provoking and maybe even brash and arrogant personalities in the worlds of mixed martial arts. His name is Front Row Brian. That's all we know his name as. He doesn't claim to be from parts unknown, but if you follow him on Twitter at Front Row Brian, I believe you're from parts unknown, even though you claim Greenwich, Connecticut.
I am from Greenwich, Connecticut. It's a beautiful town, and that was a great introduction, man. I'm going to steal that and put it in my Twitter bio.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's, everything that we've known about polarization and ice caps and annoying people, I think, is from our mutual friend, Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, he knows a lot of different things, or at least he pretends to. And, anything from D.B. Cooper to, but he doesn't know sports, though. He knows D.B. Cooper and all kinds of weird stuff.
I think he probably knows Gary Cooper super duper as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
So as far as you guys out there listening, this is kind of a joint episode between the FRB Show, which is taking the MMA podcast world by storm. You can find Front Row Brian's show at soundcloud.com/FRB Show. And for those interested in learning more about college, international, and Olympic-style wrestling with the Short Time Wrestling podcast, you can check out my show at MattTalkOnline.com. Follow at MattTalkOnline or my personal Twitter account at Jason M. Bryant. So this is a joint show. You've got it on the FRB Show. You got it on Short Time. And you can follow Front Row Brian on Twitter at Front Row Brian or FRB Show, so you can find out all the information. He had Ben Askren on recently, started his first show out with a 4-hour marathon. That 2.5 hours of that was Chael Sonnen. I had Chael on my show for an hour. The phone call went 2.5 hours, and my interview was only an hour. I mean, how long, first of all, was that the whole phone call on episode 1 with you?
Yeah, well, for that day, he's just one of these guys. When he starts, man, you just can't. You you can't shut him down. Or if he says, dude, I got something to do, he'll say, oh, you don't have time for old Chael? He makes you feel guilty about it.
I mean, I talked to him for about all of 5 minutes, giving him Vegas updates when I was driving back from Northwestern about a week or so ago. And he's, hey, all right, I'm in Connecticut. I'm going to see ESPN. I gotta pretend like I'm working here. Hopefully they don't hear that. He probably said that on his show, which is you're welcome. And it's also interesting that now we're talking about a guy who's got a pretty popular podcast. Your show is just jumping into the podcast train. I've got a wrestling podcast. Actually, I've got 6 of them. But as we all come together in this wonderful world of social media, these conversations would not be happening if it weren't for a follow at Front Row Brian. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing, man. It's a real small world, and it's getting a lot smaller because of this. And it's like the two worlds, like the wrestling and mixed martial arts. There's such there's so much in common, but there doesn't seem to be as much symmetry as there could be. I don't think a lot of MMA fans have embraced amateur wrestling or the freestyle and Greco-Roman, and they don't really follow it. Even though some of their favorite fighters said this is where they were raised from. This is their roots.
Well, and it's not just mixed martial arts. You follow professional wrestling to a point, and of course your CM Punk discussion with Ben Askren was rather colorful, and of course the CM Punk signing with the UFC kind of made a lot of people's heads scratch and jaws drop, because there's Ben Askren out there been pretty much jawing for the last 2 years to get into the UFC. CM Punk never had any type of fighting background other than he's a practitioner of BJJ, and that's pretty much it. So that was an interesting discussion where the world of professional wrestling, mixed martial arts, and amateur wrestling all kind of came together in one general conversation.
Yeah, that was interesting. Ben is another guy who you just have to hit the record button and let them take over. But it sounded like he was really negative on CM Punk, but there's a pretty good chance that Punk is going to be training at his gym, and Ben's going to help coach him. And I mean, that's not confirmed, but I'm saying that the odds are saying that Punk will go up to Milwaukee and be in the room with Pettis and Askren and Duke Rufus. And I think Ben's issue is he has Dana White has a personal vendetta against him. It has nothing to do with his fight resume or even his fight style. I mean, he's beating guys up. It's not like he's laying on them. So it's just a personal vendetta that Dana had developed against him because of his brashness. And, he was hurling allegations about performance-enhancing drugs, and that's another major pressure point for the Fertittas and Dana White. They're really sensitive about it. So I think they just basically got to the point where, who does this guy think he is? And they were in a position to show him a lesson. And they're doing it. So Ben loses out because he can't prove that he's the best in the world. And there's a pretty good chance that he is the best in the world. But on the other hand, he's still making a lot of money in Asia. They're treating him really well over there. So, he's a diversified guy, so it's not like this fighting thing is his whole existence. He could do a lot of different things. I'm sure he'll be just fine if he never steps foot in the octagon.
Now, as it pertains to the hybrid of this show here, obviously you got short time. My format for your listeners is pretty much college, high school, Olympic level wrestling based. I get guests that have wrestling backgrounds. I just had Nate Parker. He was an actor. He's been in The Great Debaters. He's been in Pride, Red Tails. Currently, he's in Beyond the Lights. Also had Sage Karam, an Indy 500 driver. We've had actors. We've had MMA guys. We've had comedians like Greg Warren. Whereas your show pretty much focuses on the MMA aspect. You do cross over into professional wrestling and a little bit into wrestling. But where does your general interest in Greco-Roman freestyle and collegiate wrestling originate?
Really, I think the foundation of my love of MMA started as a kid watching professional wrestling. And then when I started getting into my 20s, I kind of graduated towards watching MMA and not so much the scripted soap opera of professional wrestling. And then, I started to see just how similar the two products were being packaged. and sold to their fans. And, a lot of people don't know that Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar didn't cause the UFC boom period, in 2005. What started it was Vince McMahon allowing Tough, or The Ultimate Fighter, to come on after Monday Night Raw. So you had, 5 million people, 6 million people watching Raw, and then right after the show was The Ultimate Fighter. And season 2 was already okayed well before Bonnar and Griffin had that fight, that the UFC talks about as this watershed moment. So, professional wrestling kind of brought me to MMA. And then as I started to get more into it, some of my favorite fighters were the wrestlers. And so I got into that, and, I don't know it as well as I should, and I'm going to continue to learn more, and especially about the history of it. But so I kind of took a weird path. I went from professional wrestling to MMA, and now I have a keen interest in wrestling. At the high school level, the collegiate level, and also on the international circuit.
When it comes to professional wrestling, I grew up in the NWA territory down there in southeastern Virginia, and the Hampton Coliseum was NWA territory. I don't think the WWF at the time even came into the area until I believe I was probably 12 or 13. So from my growing up, I have pictures with the Road Warriors growing up, with the Rock and Roll Express, Wahoo McDaniel. I've met Ric Flair 4 different times, and twice was when I was 8 and 10 years old. So I grew up in that professional wrestling world before I discovered what high school and collegiate wrestling was. And, it's one of those things that when I got back into it in college, we used to play the Monday Night Raw drinking game. And if you've not heard this before, basically, whenever Jim Ross would throw out one of his catchphrases like, "Oh my God," you had to drink. "Hellfire and brimstone," drink. Of course, this is a PG show, so I'm not going to go into some of the other things, but basically, "He's killed him! He's killed him!" You'd consume your beer. Of course, we were all of age at the time. And then, of course, no, anytime he said the word no, we were pretty much... by the first hour of Raw, it was pretty much, we don't remember the rest of the show, and it's not like the results really counted. So my history with professional wrestling goes back deep. Obviously, we've got Chaz Betts in the NXT, Clayton Jackson in the NXT, Dolph Ziggler, who had a huge breakout tables, ladders, and chairs and stairs pay-per-view thing, where he actually shed the From Hollywood, California angle, wore some Kent State wrestling gear. I didn't watch the pay-per-view, but he kind of embraced the hometown there, and you're seeing... the Shelton Benjamins, the Brock Lesnars that have gone into professional wrestling and making a career out of it. And from the wrestling community standpoint, it really hasn't been widely appreciated or accepted, because I remember when Kurt Angle went into the WWF or the WWE, whatever they changed the name, a lot of wrestling people were kind of disappointed at it. What do you think the standpoint is from the professional wrestling fan base whenever a high-level college wrestler comes in that gets pop like a Kurt Angle or Brock Lesnar?
Well, the pro wrestling fans really respect them because, in professional wrestling, they would call those guys the shooters. And, really the origin of professional wrestling was legitimate wrestling. And, I might have the details a little off, but they got to a point where they were having these shoot matches and the guys were wrestling and they were selling thousands and thousands of tickets at baseball stadiums. I'm talking like in the 1920s and stuff. And it started to get so boring. These guys were just stalemating, and they came up with the idea, if we start toying with the results and putting certain guys over, we can make more money that way rather than having these guys just go out there and stalemate and nobody scores any points on each other. So professional wrestling comes from real wrestling. And, but you try to tell somebody that it's like you're speaking a different language, but the pro wrestling fans love the collegiate wrestlers because they're legitimate, they're the real shooters. But yeah, you're right. The amateur wrestling community will look at Kurt Angle, doing all those funny skits and, drinking the milk like Stone Cold, and they'll say it's stupid or, it's corny or what have you. But put yourself in Kurt Angle's shoes in the late 90s. He tried TV. He tried to be a sportscaster, and by his own admission, he was terrible. He just couldn't do it. He wasn't very good at it. And Vince McMahon said, "Do you want to come over now?" Because he had originally turned down an offer after the 96 Olympics. And then Vince said, "Well, the offer still stands." And, he's made himself a very rich man. The business has consumed him. He's had a lot of injuries, a lot of substance abuse issues. Unfortunately, that seems to be par for the course in pro wrestling. But it sounds like from what I've seen of him of late, he's kind of cleaned himself up a bit.
Yeah, Angle was one of the first guys I remember watching the Olympics in '96 when I discovered wrestling. And, being an upperweight myself, I gravitated to the Bruce Baumgartners, the Kerry McCoys, the Kurt Angles. So, anytime I had a chance to interview Kurt in a journalistic role, it was, I had to basically, I couldn't mark up. And for those that are listening to the short time side of these things, a mark, basically, Brian, I want you to just explain what a mark is in professional wrestling parlance.
Well, it just means a fan.
Simply put, yeah, fan. So I had to basically put my fanhood away because Angle threw me on my head at wrestling camp when I was, I think I had been wrestling for about a month and a half and went up to Clarion. And so I don't have very fond memories of actually wrestling Mr. Angle, other than years later, we are watching WrestleMania. I believe it was the one where Steve Blackman hit Shane McMahon off the side of the Titantron with a kendo stick. But it was Angle was fighting, and I use that term loosely, Chris Benoit, and hit him with a sick ankle pick. And it was a point where Angle at camp years earlier told me heavyweights don't throw ankle picks. And then when he hits that sick ankle pick on Benoit, I just scream at this jumbo screen at Middies in Newport News, Virginia, going, "You lied to me!" So I guess, anyway, that's just another side note. But as we're talking with Front Row Brian here about MMA, professional wrestling, and we're going to talk Grapple at the Garden here shortly. And one of our guests today will be Kyle Dake. He will be wrestling Arsen Jolfalakan of Armenia. And before we get to the interview with Dake, as we're going to get him on here in a bit, but Brian, when you first heard about this matchup as part of the Grapple at the Garden, you got Dake's wrestling Greco against the reigning world champion. What were your thoughts?
I thought it was great. It's something, I was talking to Chael Sonnen a lot. We talk wrestling probably more than MMA these days. And he said Dake would just be perfect in Greco. And of course, at 74 kilos in freestyle, man, that ladder is pretty intimidating. You come in fourth in that, in the trials, and you had a pretty good day, So maybe he should look at Greco, and I think that he's just trying it out here, and maybe in 16 that's what he'll do.
Well, of course, he's got to get through a guy that won the first Greco-Roman world medal for the United States since 2009, a guy lovingly becoming known as the Cowboy worldwide with his Chuck Norris stash. That's Andy Bisick, and Andy, I think, is dinged up right now. But there was some little bit of dissension within the Greco ranks that some of the athletes that got the Greco call to put it on the stage that weren't a world medalist. I mean, some people thought it should have been Bisick versus Jolfalakan.
Yeah, and, if you want to do things on merit, sure. He had a great world championships and such, but the promoters of this event, Madison Square Garden Entertainment, are in the business of selling tickets, and everybody that follows wrestling knows who Kyle Dake is. He's a legend, and he's 23 years old, and Cornell is 3 hours north of New York City. Now, Andy Bisick is obviously has his credentials are far better than Dake as far as in Greco-Roman, but is he going to sell 10,000 tickets at Madison Square Garden?
Probably not, unless he brings all those people from Uzbekistan who became fans over there in Tashkent, because that guy, every time he showed up on the big screen, the crowd went nuts.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised that Madison Square Garden went with the Armenian. I mean, I know Dake wanted to challenge himself, but I thought he'd go with somebody, with a little bit bigger profile here in the States. And I think this is only his second match back. He wrestled in the Global Championships against Howe. Yeah, his second match back, and I can't believe his conditioning is there yet, but I guess that's why he's doing this.
Well, I know a friend of mine, Matt Holt, who posts frequently on the message boards and on Twitter, had brought up an interesting point that some of these one-off matches can sometimes, lead to some questionable results. Obviously, we've seen it with the Beat the Streets events where, the Americans wrestle really strong. They're on the home turf, and some of the Russians are like, all right, yeah, I'm going out there. I'm going to try to win the match. But, when the lights are on at the World Championships, it could be a completely different thing. I mean, I think what Holt had brought up was, is Joe Fulgan going to come in and look at this as a vacation and get some money out of it? Or do you think he's going to go out and try to win the match? And having talked to this guy and interviewed him, I think, there might be a little bit of that. All right, I get to go see New York. There's a good Armenian population there. But at the same point, these guys are wrestlers. They are going to wrestle for pride.
Sure. What's your take on these one-offs, these like exhibitions? I've seen some fans say, that they're happy the guys are getting paid. Like I think Dake got about $7,500 for that match with Hal, which is, he even said an incredible amount of money for 9 minutes of wrestling. What do you think of these one-offs? Are they entertaining to you? Because I've seen some fans like they don't really care about them because they don't mean anything. They said, wake me up when the World Team Trials or the Open.
Well, I'd actually like to wake up the fans before that, because as much as they talk about those events, the NCAA Championships is the only event that really draws. You'll get pockets. Obviously, Penn State sold out their duels. Iowa brings in big numbers, and then other than a couple of events here and there at random places where Penn State or Iowa comes in as a visiting team, there aren't that many people that show up for the World Team Trials. I mean, in Madison this year, for as much talent that was concentrated into those weight classes, I mean, you had 3, 4, 5 NCAA champions at each weight, multiple-time All-Americans, and there was 2,000 people there. So, people can blame USA Wrestling for marketing all they want. They've got enough time. They know it. So when they say, wake me up for the World Team Trials, I don't know if they're even – I don't think anybody woke them up. So, but as far as the one-off event, I think you're seeing obviously we've seen the one-off kind of become in a league. Flow's got their Flow Premier League, which kind of seems to be more of an offshoot or a rebranding of Agon. The Global Wrestling Championships, Wayne Boyd and Andy Barth, they've got some money behind them. I really liked the Victory Wrestling Challenge last year out in Omaha, which they didn't fiddle with the rules. They didn't create hybrid styles. They wrestled freestyle. They wrestled a Greco match or two, but the only difference in rules was the overtime. They went unlimited overtime because it was kind of a one-on-one dual meet kind of scenario. But, I am from the camp that, hey, if these athletes are getting an opportunity to compete and make money at it, absolutely, it's great. But I would say don't take the results from a ranking perspective if you're going to argue about the United World Wrestling rankings and looking at these matches as rankable criteria. No. So, I mean, remember, they're not on the the United World Wrestling circuit. I like them from a spectator view. I just wish that they would stick with one style and not change the rules to be more American friendly. And here's why. If you were to bring the Victory Wrestling Championships, as for example, they do the Victory Fighting Championship, same group, Ryan Stoddard out in Omaha. Now, imagine if you brought a team of international wrestlers over to compete against the Americans in that type of ultra superstar MMA type of march out and display. And it's like, okay, well, you can't teach the foreigners the hybrid folk style scoring in a week or a workout. You keep the rules the same, then you can have those mega matches that, they won't affect for rankings, but the prize money is there. The foreigners don't have to change the way they wrestle. The Americans don't have to change the way they wrestle. I think those type of formats, you stick with the freestyle rules as much as they might change from United World Wrestling. I think ultimately that's how you can get the entire world involved instead of just catering to the American collegiate fan.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense because I was talking with John Reeder, the national champion from Iowa State, and one of the best guys at I think it's 86 kilos now. And this is when he was going to wrestle Jake Herbert in Chicago. He's now going to wrestle Darren Wynn. Herbert hurt his knee or something like that. And I said, "Well, what are the rules, John?" And he said, "I have no idea. I don't know." It's like, yeah, you might want to find out.
And now joining us, going to be wrestling at the Global Wrestling Championships in Greco-Roman. He was a 4-time NCAA champion at 4 different weight classes for the Big Red of Cornell. His name is Kyle Dake. making a big return to Madison Square Garden. Kyle, first of all, the question you've got to be getting most of the time is, why Greco?
Coach Lindland is a great recruiter, I guess. You got to give him some credit. He really wants to promote the sport, and he's doing a great job. And I really respect him. And he just basically wouldn't let me say no. He was very convincing. And I'd always enjoyed Greco when I was younger. The old rules is really what I knew. I was used to being able to put in reverse lifts and stuff like that, and getting back into it. It's just it's a new challenge. I don't get frustrated that often in folk style or freestyle, but the past 10 Greco practices I've been in, I don't think there's been one practice where I've left not frustrated. But it's a good thing because I'm getting better. I'm learning from it, and it's just making me a better freestyle wrestler.
This is kind of a tall order. I mean, I was talking with your representation there, Nick Garone, on the Monarch Mattcast earlier this month, and he was talking about you weren't going to do this unless you were going to get the best. And then when they got Jolfo Lacan, the reigning world champ from Armenia, he's like, "Hey, I got him," and you're like, "Really? Okay, let's do it."
Yeah. It was kind of it wasn't, I just wanted to see if Matt, see if that would get Matt off my scent for some reason. I hadn't wrestled Greco in a while. I was, a little skeptical about doing it. And, I just tried to make it as hard as possible for him to get me someone to wrestle, and he did it. So I had to will it to my end. And, I'm glad that he did get it, because this past month and a half, 2 months, it's been really good for my wrestling overall. My parterre has, gone through the roof. My tie-ups, clearing ties, basic wrestling positions have all, gotten much better. Especially when I was wrestling, I'm wrestling at a pretty high, with high-level guys in the Greco world. So, I'm getting some very, very good experience.
Kyle, you had a kind of a rough go of it a little bit with your ankle, and I know you tore some ligaments. You thought at first it might have been just broken, and then you had to have some screws placed in there. How's it feeling right now? And you feel cardio-wise you're maybe 80%, 90%, or how you feeling?
I feel pretty good. Obviously, my cardio is not where it needs to be. I'm not peaking right now. So I'm just trying to build a pretty good base, making my push towards quote unquote the postseason. But I'm learning and getting better, and my foot's been feeling great. There's only been like one or two times where, I got stomped on, and I hadn't had somebody stomp on my foot in a long time, and it kind of just threw me off for a second, but it was fine. But I feel like I can wrestle a 6-minute match. I feel like I can wrestle 2-3 matches and still be good. And that's what I'm working for every single day. I'm still working to get better conditioning, because that's a huge part that, in my mind, doesn't get not enough credit on the international scene. You look at the Iranians and, the guys from, the elite level guys from Russia, and they're all in great shape. They can wrestle an entire tournament. And that's just because they have great partners, and, they're wrestling the best guys ever in the world every single day. And, I'm trying to copy that and really make sure my shape stays up. So I've been traveling a lot. I just went out to Phoenix and wrestled with Jordan Oliver. I went to Colorado Springs and trained with, Coach Lindland and a couple of the Greco guys out there. And now Coach Lindland's back out to Ithaca training here again with me. And he brought in, Jordan Spieler. So I have some, good Greco guys, surrounding me, but also the freestyle guys. So I'm just constantly making those jumps with my conditioning.
After Grapple at the Garden, I had read or heard on one of the message boards you're thinking about going to Paris and then possibly Russia in late January. that your first international?
Yeah. So it's I think that the way the tour works is we're going over to Russia first and then to Paris on the way home. But that's going to be my first tournament back. I'm pretty excited for it just because I've never been to Russia. I've been overseas quite a few times, but I've never been to Russia and gone and trained with those guys. So, it'll be a good little training camp, but then it'll also be, a good test, a good test to see where I'm at. Obviously I'm going to go out and win, but it's going to be a very good experience, and I'm going to come back with a lot of knowledge about myself and about the sport. So I'm really excited to get a chance to go over there.
Kyle, with the Grapple at the Garden, New York City, this is the world's most famous arena. The NCAA championships are going to be there in 2016. This is the third year at the Grapple. I mean, what is it like to know that you're going to be the main event along with Tervel and Gatsalov at the Grapple at the Garden? You're going to close this thing down.
It's kind of funny to think about, looking at the guys who are actually in the Grapple. You have Tervel, who's a bronze medalist. You have Gatsalov, who's I don't know how many time world champion, and then you have Jeff Lekian, who's a world champ, and I don't know how many time medalist. So, and you have me, and I've never even been to a world champ. I've never wrestled in the world championships, and I'm just this young guy who's coming on the scene. So, hopefully that I can go out and prove myself a little bit and show that I belong there, and I'm one of the best wrestlers, doesn't matter the style, in the world. So that's really what I'm working for and hope to accomplish at this big arena. And it's going to be great for the sport as well, because it's not only giving exposure to folk style and freestyle, but it's also giving some exposure to Greco too. And I think that if we all make a good push, we can really make a difference in our country if we start training freestyle and Greco throughout our youth and junior high and high school and college years. Because I think that a lot of times people are trying to specialize too early, where if you diversify, your talents, you're going to have a lot more opportunities to score, because you're going to see different positions. A guy that only shoots a single leg or only shoots a high crotch is only going to see high crotches in single legs. He's not going to see those other openings. It's fast. And, it's a game of fractions of a second. And if you have those fractions of a second where you kind of have a mental break and you don't see them right away, then you're not going to be able to get that attack. Where, you have guys who have been training freestyle, training Greco, getting all these different feels, and it's going to just enhance their folk style ability. And I know that's the main goal in America, is to be an NCAA champion, because that's just what our country values. That's what's on ESPN. That's what that's where we wrestle in college. Guys want to go get an education, and that's just the pinnacle in America. The pinnacle in America is basically to be an NCAA champion. So you have these kids who are so specialized in folk style that they kind of forget about these other two styles that can really, really make them a better wrestler. So hopefully that message is kind of put out there for all the youth and high school kids out in America, really.
Kyle, you bring up that folk style is what we value in this country, because it is what's on TV. The Big Ten Network, ESPN, and even ESPN3 on the iPad and on the Apple TV. They're showing the preliminary rounds, and a guy that's kind of taking what you've said and valuing freestyle over folk style is Aaron Pico, 18-year-old phenom who recently just signed a contract with Viacom, or Bellator MMA, but is still going to pursue freestyle wrestling at least through 2016. So just wanted to get your thoughts on him signing a MMA deal and at such a young age. Is it too much too soon, or do you think he's mature enough to handle it at this point?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to actually talk with Aaron and kind of get to know him. I went to a couple of world championships while he was there, and I've been to a couple of training camps, and just been able to talk to him. He's just a normal guy. Although he is a little bit younger, he I think he's got a very good support system. You know, his family's behind him. He's got his coaches behind him. He's got, you know, a lot of things going for him. And you know, I'm totally for someone, you know, swimming upstream. You know, if he thinks this is the best route for him, then more power to him. You know, all I can say is that I hope he's getting a high quality education, and I know that's what a lot of people see. You know, when they go to college, they get a high quality education, and after college, then they can pursue something different. You know, because in wrestling, it's just tough on your body, and you know, he's doing it at a time where his body recovers much faster. You know, if you and Aaron Pico were to go train for a day, the next day you'd probably be wanting to stay in your bed all day, and he would be up training again. And you know, it's the same thing, but it's just on a little bit different scale when he's, you know, training and versus, you know, an older guy who's, you know, 25, 26, who is still training full time. They just don't recover as fast. So if his skill sets are there and he has, you know, all else equal, and he's kind of sitting a little prettier, minus the experience of it. And he's making that up because he is always overseas. Every time I talk to that kid, he's like, I'm in Russia, I'm in Ukraine, I'm somewhere. And he's actually got a lot of experience for such a young kid. But I just hope that, you know, he's getting an education. He's not putting all of his eggs in one basket, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. You know, you don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes. So if something tragic happened, which, you know, obviously I hope doesn't happen, you know, he could be paralyzed, and he's going to need to have his education to kind of get him through the rest of his life. So we all take that risk, and we all weigh the benefits versus the risk, and I think that he made a decision that was right for him. Obviously, it's not what the fans want to see, because they want to see how well he was done in college, and that it goes back to the point that everyone wants to see the NCAAs. They want to see Aaron Pico on TV. They want to see Aaron Pico wrestle in front of 20,000 fans. You know, and he chose a different route, and I'm completely fine with it.
Sure. Just to follow up with that, you know, I kind of focus more in the world of mixed martial arts, and I know you've probably answered this question too many times, but you know, when you're done with wrestling, when you've accomplished what you want to accomplish, is there an amount of money that can get you inside a MMA cage?
You know, everything has its price. You know, how high is that price? I don't know.
Because I know it's usually not something a guy from Cornell would do.
Yeah, you know, there's been I can only think of one guy who's really done it, and that's John Cholish. But there's not very many guys who go into MMA at Cornell. You know, it's the type of people that Coach Cole and Coach Hahn and Coach Gray recruit are the type of people who really value education, and they don't want to just be known as wrestlers, or they don't want to just be known as MMA fighters. They want to be something not bigger but different. You know, they want to be able to do other things and have other interests. You know, there's some kids who, you know, Nashawn Garrett is a great example of someone who is one of the greatest wrestlers in the country, if not the greatest wrestler in the country. His favorite thing to do is not wrestle. His favorite thing to do is to go to church and to be a part of that group. You know, that's what he wants. If you were to introduce himself, he'd be like, "Hi, my name's Garrett." Yada yada. You're talking. Oh yeah, you know, I'm going to this church group, whatever, and that's great. And there's like hundreds of examples over the years that you see those types of people. Not with just that, but you know, another guy would be someone who wants to be. You know, he's like, I just love engineering. That's what I want to do. And you know, I love wrestling too, but you know, I don't want to wrestle for my entire life. So the type of people that are recruited at Cornell are just wired a little different, and that it's not a bad thing, you know. Obviously, if someone had a passion to come to Cornell and then they wanted to go into MMA, they could definitely do it. I just can't see myself at this moment going into MMA, just to go in. You know, if I don't know how much money it would take, but it would probably take a lot of money to get me to that cage.
Been talking with Kyle Dake, 4-time NCAA champion from Cornell, first ever to do it at 4 different weight classes. He, along with Arsen Jofalakan, Tervel Delagnev, and Kazimir Gutsalov, man, you know what? I'm going to butcher that guy's name for as long as I can remember. Gutsalov is all I'm going to say. You guys are the main event at Madison Square Garden, Grapple the Garden, coming up December 21st. Kyle, final thoughts, and to get people to come to the greatest in the world's most famous sports arena.
You know, it's going to be a huge event. You're going to be able to see great college wrestling, but as well as you're going to be able to see some great high-level wrestling. You know, it's going to be a heck of a time. You know, if you're within driving distance, you got to make the trip. It'll definitely be worth it. It's going to be a ton of fun, and you're going to be able to meet some of your heroes. You know, you're going to be able to meet the Nashawn Garrett, the Mitchell Port, the AJ Shop, the Gabe Dean. You're going to meet, and then you're going to meet Tervel Delagnev. You can meet, you know, a Russian superstar or Armenian superstar. You know, there's just so many people that you can come and meet, and I think that if you pass up that opportunity, another one might not present itself. So, you know, take what you can, and if you can make it, I hope to see you there.
And now we will pick up with Joe Warren, the Bellator MMA champion and Greco-Roman world champion back in 2006. His team, Team Warren, going to be taking on Team Gracie at the Grapple at the Garden. Joe, this is an interesting type of scenario because it's a lot of MMA guys, a lot of wrestlers, and they're coming together to wrestle in a match at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, you know, that's really why we did it. You know, last year they wanted to get some MMA guy or get people back wrestling and old wrestlers. So I just wanted to get the MMA guys that, you know, we all wrestled in college together, so we all love wrestling, get us back on the mat. It's strictly for the kids, you know, maybe go out there and put on a show and have fun for the kids, show those kids that, you know, all these MMA stars are still great wrestlers.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Most of, if not all of your team has a wrestling background, while Renzo Gracie's team's got some guys that had wrestling, but there's also guys that are out there. They're not with the wrestling background. They're jiu-jitsu guys. They're grapplers. They have some wrestling background, but they weren't necessarily college wrestlers, and that makes for an interesting matchup dynamic.
Well, that's what we were trying to do. You know, I mean, Renzo is a great man, and he does a great service in Manhattan and in New York City there for jiu-jitsu. And so a great following. You know, us wrestlers, we respect the jiu-jitsu mindset and who they are, and very respectful. And so it's very similar. You know, a lot of the base of jiu-jitsu and is wrestling. A lot of base for everything. Pedigree is the wrestling. So, you know, we kind of thought it'd be fun to have some wrestlers wrestle jiu-jitsu guys last year. And then it just kind of got to the point where I started, you know, people started hearing about it, and then all the Big Ten guys and everyone started calling saying, hey, I want to do this. It's going to be fun, you know, and, you know, now it's where it is now today. It should be a pretty fun little event or dual meet.
Yeah, one point I brought up with what Front Row Brian and I brought up was that the MMA is not legalized in New York, and this is an opportunity for some of these practitioners of MMA that they don't get the opportunity to compete in their home state. But yeah, it's a different format. I mean, they're out there. They're MMA guys. They're wrestling in Madison Square Garden. I mean, the arena itself has got to be a huge draw for these guys that want to compete in this thing.
Yeah, you know, and that's what I said. Exactly the same thing. I said, listen, we're trying to push the envelope on the legalization of MMA in New York. So any way that we could get our MMA stars to compete in that city is you know, a plus or a bonus to move forward to be able to get that legalized. So, you know, everyone wants to see me and Mo and Brendan and a bunch of guys get out there and get after it. Gray Maynard and Scott Jorgensen, and you know, it's going to be fun. You know, so it's going to be competitive. It's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, we're putting it on for the kids. So hopefully, all the matches. I know some of these guys are all fired up right now. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Now we'll focus to the main event for a moment, where we've got Gonsalov and Dalagnev, and then the Greco-Roman match between Dake and Jofala Khan. And you being a Greco guy, what are your thoughts on Kyle Dake wrestling Greco?
Yeah, I mean, I went into training center for a day and worked with Kyle and Lindland and worked with him. He's a very talented athlete, man. He's as good as it gets. I mean, if he wanted to make that switch over, I think he would be successful doing that, But that being said, he's a freestyle wrestler. It's two different sports. It's night and day. And it takes a lot of time, muscle memory, and position-wise for your body to understand how to react in a Greco situation. We're flat-footed and we hold position, and there's no real rolling around and scrambling in Greco. It's position stuff. It's arm drags. It's tight gut wrenches and lifts. So I think there might be a little bit of a problem there. With Kyle, with just learning Greco right now. I mean, if this was a Greco guy that is just a Greco wrestler, it'd be one thing, but this is a current world champion, from a family of world champion Greco-Roman wrestlers. So, I got my fingers crossed and I'm pulling for Dake, but we'll see what happens.
As we circle back to this dual meet, and last year you guys are out there in the rash guards, the fight shorts, and the benches. You guys were getting into this. I mean, there was Frankie Edgar goes out there, gets a fall. Everybody's like, yeah. I mean, it was like a real team environment, something you really don't get a whole lot in MMA because it's so individualized when you guys are in the cage. I mean, talk about that team dynamic and what it was like last year, and what made you want to do this again this year.
Yeah, that's really why I wanted to do it. I wanted to bring the team atmosphere back to it. Wrestling's an individual sport, but we all grew up in college wrestling on our teams, and it was a family, and we did everything for them. And then I moved forward onto even a better team, Olympic team. And then, I'm really comfortable with this team environment and the family environment. So we got those teams together again, and the dynamic of those athletes. Once you get them together, sitting there, you guys instantly become teammates, and you guys are pulling for each other and getting each other ready to go. It's kind of funny how it works, and that's how it worked last year. The crowd was going crazy. I was hyping them up and throwing my arms around. I pinned my guy and did a backflip, and everyone went nuts. It's just it was fun because it wasn't MMA fans, it was strictly wrestling fans.
Now, with these wrestling matchups, you got an interesting dynamic. You're going to be wrestling against Scott Jorgensen, a guy who was ever so close to hitting the podium in college at Boise State. With an opportunity like a guy like Scott, who, he's done well in MMA and the UFC, but, his wrestling career, he didn't quite hit that podium. You were a guy, an All-American. You won a world championship. Do you think that this is an opportunity for him to be like, all right, I can get a little bit of that, maybe some retribution in his college career and taking out Joe Warren?
Well, every wrestler that didn't, end up winning whatever they wanted to always has that in their back of their mind, So this is another reason everyone wants to get out and wrestle again. But, Scott's a good friend of mine. I wanted to wrestle an MMA guy, but no one would wrestle me. You know what I mean? So, I called some buddies, and he said he would wrestle me, and we train a lot, so I was excited. It's competitive, so it's going to be fun. It's for the kids, so it's not really, it's not a really pride match for me and Scotty as much as all these other guys. You know what I mean? I wanted to compete, but, it's hard to find somebody to get after, to wrestle or even compete against the baddest man, so, I gotta call in my buddies for that.
I was wondering how long it was going to take for Joe Warren to throw his signature line out, the baddest man on the planet. Moving 140 pounds, Stephen Abbas, he was back on the mat not that long ago, wrestling in one of the Agon events. Going to take on Raleigh Peterkin. Peterkin, a little bit like Jorgensen, he was so close to placing in college, and he's gonna wrestle an Olympic silver medalist here.
Yep, and we'll see what happens. That's another thing. I mean, it's a competitive match. It's the thing like MMA. You can't really. It's not a very good bet ever, MMA fight or wrestling match. The best guy can always get beat. So So these guys are older and they're a little more advanced in their careers. Wrestlers, the older we get, usually the smarter we get. We'll see who's in better shape there, and you never know what's going to happen on the mat. So that's why you guys got to tune in. And it's a pay-per-view event. You can buy it, but if I'm anywhere near Madison Square Garden, I would show up and see that. It's an early event on Sunday, and you're in and out of there.
Now, another intriguing matchup has two guys that are actually still very active and fighting for world team berths and spots on the national team, and that's Jordan Oliver and Frank Molinaro. Got a little New Jersey, Pennsylvania situation going out there, Oklahoma State versus Penn State. These guys are actively competitive with each other. They're at the same weight class. I mean, what are you expecting with this match with Oliver and Molinaro?
Yeah, I think Oliver's going to get after him and beat the crap out of him. And just hold up that Team Warren banner. I think that's what's going to happen. But again, you never know. I'm excited to see that matchup too. They're all fired up. Those guys, I've been reading tweets from them, and they're ready to kill each other. So that's another matchup that I'm looking forward to. I think Jordan Oliver's just a little faster, and right now he's just moving a little better right now. And I think he's going to end up on top there.
Now, one thing I noticed when this lineup came out was not just the star power that is from the wrestling community, but you also brought Daryl Christian out of retirement. How did you talk him into this?
Yeah. Daryl's a good friend of mine. I mean, one of my best friends. He's been there for me. Lived at the Olympic Training Center for years, with Linlin and Couture and Henderson, our captains. And we went through that, and one of the toughest wrestlers I've ever seen in my life, and he just moved on to business. Still as tough as nails, and he still comes and trains me. And I said, "You want to wrestle?" And he got all excited. So I think Daryl, I'd like to get him out of retirement anyways, but he's a very dangerous person to wrestle. So great season for a big, rough night. I have a feeling.
Gray Maynard wrestled not that long ago, also at the Flow Premier League event, and he was pretty solid in beating Dennis Bermudez, and you got him back on the mat. He's a 4-time All-American at Michigan State. I mean, Gray Maynard just loves wrestling.
Yeah, he does. He does. I wrestled at University of Michigan, and he wrestled at Michigan State. I think the worst choice he ever made was making that Michigan State choice. He came and did the recruiting stuff with me and Rovat and Kozicki from, he moved to St. Ed's in the middle of his high school career from Vegas and got recruited. He got all fired up. He wanted to wrestle no matter what. And I was going to try to give him an easy match. He didn't want an easy match. He wanted a competitive match. He wanted to get after it. It's just a wrestler in all of us, the competitive side. It's funny when you talk to him. It comes out a little bit different than when you talk to him about fighting.
One of the other signature guys that you've got in the event with it, King Mo. I mean, King Mo is one of the most entertaining guys in all of sports, whether it be mixed martial arts, his foray into professional wrestling, and he was fun to watch as a freestyle and as a folk style at Central Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. You got King Mo. I mean, that's got to be fun for you.
Well, me and Mo, we also grew up together. Me, Daryl, Mo, we all lived at the Olympic Training Center together. And, me, Daryl Christian, Daniel Cormier, Stephen Abbas, Mo LaWalls, all of us lived there together. And so, me and Mo also, we took the same flight out to Temecula our first time to start fighting with Dan. And we joined Dream the same time together, and then moved into Bellator. So we're close friends. So it's really nice to see that he's wrestling also. He wanted to wrestle really bad last year, and he hurt his knee right before it, so he couldn't compete. So this year he promised that I'd keep the spot for him, and he wanted to do the heavyweight. So he's wrestling for us, and you know how dangerous he is. So another Gracie's gonna have a rough night there too. And Brendan Ward, he's a piece of work too, and he loves wrestling as much as the rest of them. So I have just a bunch of diehard wrestlers who can't beat that lineup.
Yeah, Brennan Ward, a Division III guy, for those that might not be familiar with the name, a Division III All-American at Johnson and Wales. And the coach up there, Lonnie Morris, has these shirts that say JW Wrestling, and on the back it says, not just a cooking school. And Brennan Ward definitely embodies that he might be a Johnson and Wales graduate. He's not just a cook guy. He's not a culinary guy.
I love that kid. He's been training out in Denver with us, me and Mark Montoya. He'll be there also in our corner. He's my coach, my MMA coach, and me and, a bunch of guys out here in Denver at Factory X. So, Brendan's been out here. He drove back. He's real excited. He loves wrestling as much as the rest of them, like I said. So you're going to see he wrestled on our team last year, and he did really well. So we asked him to come back. And he's a Bellator fighter, so part of the family.
Now, one of the things that I had a little bit of confusion with last year was it freestyle or folk style? And just for those that might be wondering what style, we wrestling freestyle, we wrestling folk style here at the Garden.
Yeah, geez, I don't even, that's funny you said that. Before I even wrestled, I had no idea what style I was wrestling. Last year I was standing there and I was just kind of laughing. I said, "Is this a Grapple match?" And they said, "No, it's a freestyle match." I said, "What? Oh my God, I've wrestled freestyle since high school or college." So yeah, it's more of a freestyle back 2-3 minute periods. I think it's a freestyle scoring system. But talking to these people today, it sounded like it might be a folk style. So I didn't even know. I didn't think there was a weigh-in either. So now there's a weigh-in, and it's pay-per-view. And, I've been busy on the Bellator circuit right now. So I've been just getting these calls last moment. And every day it seems to change. So I'm excited to see what happens. I might be wrestling Greco one period and freestyle the next. You never know. Whatever they want to throw in front of us, as soon as I throw some shoes on, it doesn't usually matter on a mat, either style.
Now you're going out to New York early. You're gonna do a camp and some clinics down there at Apex with Damian Logan. Just talk about that opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know what I can say about Damian Logan. He's a backbone of me and wrestling. We were college roommates. He was one of the best wrestlers ever coming out of Jersey. He owns Apex Wrestling. There's 3 or 4 locations, 1,200 kids. There's some of the best wrestlers I've ever seen. So every time I get an opportunity, I get back to Jersey and I work at these Apex camps, and I do privates and clinics and things like with some of the best wrestlers around. So, and he is our head coach for Team Warren, and he kind of set all this up. If it wasn't for Logan's been in my corner every single fight. And he knows all the guys that are on our team, so it was kind of a friendship. Give us, come do it for the kids instead of a bunch of cash. And so it's I go out tomorrow, and I'll be doing clinics at Apex tomorrow and Thursday, and then we'll probably be in the city and get after it for the rest of the weekend.
Now, a couple things we want to bring up that don't necessarily center around the event. Again, the event, Grapple the Garden, coming up December 21st, Madison Square Garden on pay-per-view and on live stream for those that are interested in following the college angle, which we touched on a previous episode of Short Time. But a couple topics that we want to throw out there. First off, Front Row Brian's going to send this one in. He's wondering, what are your thoughts on whether or not Henry Cejudo can win a UFC title if he can hold the weight?
Yeah. I don't know. It makes me want to go fight him. Henry, he's a Olympic champ. If anybody can do it, a world champ wrestler can do it. So, I won't put anything past him. We'll see if he can make the weight. He gotta, when he was making that weight, he was a young boy, man. He was 20 years old, so he grew up a little bit. He seems a little bit more mature. He looked a lot better this last fight. I understand the progression of the sport and how hard it is to make that transition and win. So, yeah, I think he can do it, man. I think if he puts his mind to it, I think he might be able to do it. And, I'd help him any way I can. But, it's, you never know. I put more stock in a Greco guy. But, I think Henry, if anybody can do it at 25, I think if he does get, disciplined, he will make that weight. And then I think you will see a little more of a power-dominant fighter there. His striking it looks really good, and his wrestling's top of the game. So just see if his speed's there at 25.
Now, one of the topics that came down, it's kind of been blowing up the Twitter world, has been this lawsuit filed against the UFC. What are your initial thoughts about that?
I have no idea. I've just been reading about it, today. I don't know much about it. It's hard for me to actually talk about it. I was reading a little bit Twitter on the plane today, but I don't know much about it. So it's hard for me to comment. All
right, fair enough. I'm sure there's enough of that in the Twitterverse to occupy everybody's time. But one thing that, yeah, Joe Warren, you're a pretty prolific guy on Twitter these days. But let's talk about what Joe Warren is doing on a day-to-day basis. So, what are you up to? What's your training situation like? And, other than the wrestling event coming up, when are we going to see Joe Warren back in the ring, back in the fighting game?
Yeah, March 27th. March 27th, I fight again. I headline the Bellator card. I fight Marcus Galvo again, a rematch. It's going to be another big event. I enjoy fighting in that Bellator cage, and it seems like I fight another Brazilian every single time. So it's just, I'm going to crush another Brazilian in a Bellator cage. And I'm pretty excited about that March 27th. I'm training every day here. I really think I've really kind of got, I'm on my groove right now. I've figured the sport out a little bit. I think the muscle memories came this year, this 5th year. Everything, I have so much technique I don't even know I have. I've been training so much for these last 5 years that, the muscle memory's finally coming. I'm not really thinking, I'm reacting. Things are landing really solid. I'm not expecting. I didn't know I was such a damaging kicker. So, it's different every day for me. You don't usually get to say this. I did this when I switched over to Greco. Once I figured it out, it was exciting for me then. I don't hate fighting now. I'm excited about it. I'm excited that I've got like a whole new bag of tricks that I never know what's coming out now when I'm training. So it's just, I'm extremely violent and way more dangerous than ever before. So it's dangerous to be in that cage with me, especially these 35ers.
Now, when it comes to Greco-Roman, we'll shift the focus back to that for a moment. And Matt Lindland took over at the Olympic Training Center to be the national team Greco-Roman coach. We got the first medal for the United States since 2009 with Andy Bisick. And, what are your thoughts on where the Greco-Roman program is heading with USA Wrestling?
Yeah, Andy Bisick, I'm really very excited. He medaled. I was just in the Olympic Training Center last week. I feel like that's a home of mine. That's where I trained and I won. It's sad to see the program down like that. I would like to help as much as I can get that program back. If I need to even put some shoes on and go win something to make it exciting again. When I left that program, we were world champs and we were winning titles and a lot of medals, and it was very exciting to be part of the Greco-Roman team. And I think that's not far away. I think that's these Americans, we have such great talent, youth talent out there. We just need to get them excited about Greco, and I think we just need to find the next baddest man out there to win a gold medal in Greco, and I think it's probably going to be coming pretty soon. But I'm on board to help the USA Wrestling and that team as much as I can, and I think Matt Lindland and me see eye to eye, and I think hopefully I'll be a very helpful tool with them in the next few years.
All right, Joe, you've never been one to mince words or hold back, so I want to hear your sales pitch to get people out to Madison Square Garden on December 21st if they can't make it, to buy the pay-per-view.
Yeah, come on, the baddest man on the planet's getting after it. I talk a lot of shit about my wrestling, and you finally get an opportunity to come and watch it. When's the last time you get an opportunity to see unbelievable MMA fighters get on a wrestling mat and get after it? And it's very, very exciting. I think for $14.99, it's a win-win situation. You should buy it, scream at that television, and make sure that you. If you're close, I would buy a ticket and come see it.
The baddest man on the planet, Joe Warren. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored, man. Anytime you need me, drop me a line.